box office. In England, however, producer-director Stanley Kubrick and novelist Arthur C. Clarke were preparing a production that would challenge audiences and visual effects artists for years to come. It was the first big shot for Douglas Trumbull, the man who would go on to design the effects for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And it was the first time that audiences used to the reality of NASA's pristine imagery could truly experience the feeling of being on location, out there. The film was 2001, A Space Odyssey. 2001 may have been an instant classic, but it was far from being a commercial success, requiring nearly 5 years just to make back its investment. There was, however, the matter of the film's impact on an up-and-coming generation of visual effects designers.
Well, I was younger when 2001 first came out, and I was very affected by it because of its perfection. It was so clean, it was so critically elegant and perfect in every way. And I think it was so good that the ability to do those type of effects, to pull that kind of thing off, was really lost on everybody. It was too much too soon. People didn't know quite how to apply it correctly. And it wasn't until almost 10 years later that Star Wars came along and put something that was commercially viable, combined it with effects, and then we had the success. Until that period of time, we had gone through about 10, 15 years where films were done on location with the kind of nadir or zenith, depending on your point of view, of that kind of thing being French Connection, where suddenly with faster film stocks, faster lenses, everybody said, whoa, you don't have to shoot this on the back lot anymore. You can shoot any film you want anywhere in the world on location, existing light conditions in many cases, and whole areas can go dark and light, and it can be very realistic, very gritty. So that took everybody away from the studio. However, when Star Wars came along, that portion of quote-unquote studio magic became very important. And the thought was that it might do James Bond type business, might do $50 or $60 million, and if it did, everybody would be extremely happy. As it turned out, they were more than happy.
But going in, at least, Lucas was far from certain. In order to succeed within the restrictions levied by an apprehensive 20th Century Fox, he would have to churn out nearly twice as many effect shots as 2001, and in less than 1/3 that film's time and budget. Knowing that no existing Hollywood effects facility was up to the task, he decided to set up shop himself. An empty warehouse next to the Van Nuys Airport would become home to Industrial Light and Magic Incorporated. And when Douglas Trumbull turned down the task of getting it up and running, the offer fell to one of his former protégés, John Dykstra.
One of the hardest parts of doing special effects is coming up with a solution to the problem of the line in the script that says, unlike anything you've ever seen before. We worked for probably 3 months just putting together the group of people that was going to attack the problem. And then once they were assembled, just put it on the table and went after it. And it's the only way you can go after those kinds of things, is aggressively pursue solving the problem. If you sit around and wish for a device that you don't have, or you sit around and wish for a story or a plot ploy of some kind that solves your problems, you'll be wishing from now until you die. The real key to it is to take what you have in terms of storyboards, which is what we had to define what we were going to do, and figure out a way to do them.
The complexity of the space battle scenes Lucas had envisioned would require an equally sophisticated approach in the photography of the miniature spacecraft. The decision was reached to build a motion control system, a robot camera equipped with a computer memory that could store and repeat the most elaborate moves, enabling entire fleets of spacecraft to interact. The system was developed concurrently by Dykstra and Al Miller for Star Wars, and Douglas Trumbull for the UFOs of Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Well, basically, you want to have a moving camera platform. It's been done in the past, many, many years ago. They did what's called matched moves. Basically, it's when you combine two elements of film onto a single element of film to make them appear as though they were photographed at one time. The most simple example is a match shot where you have people in the foreground walking and talking on the ground, and you want to have a giant pumpkin behind them, but you don't have a giant pumpkin. You black out the area above them and paint in the giant pumpkin, and you put those two pieces of film together, and you have what appears to be a giant pumpkin and people. Well, the motion control aspect of it was added when you said, well, I want to pan the camera across the people and the pumpkin. And basically what it allows you to do is to take the people, photograph them, remembering your positional displacement per frame, so that if you pan 2 degrees per frame, it remembers that. And then you go shoot the pumpkin, and you pan 2 degrees per frame on the pumpkin. And when you put those two pieces of film together, it appears as though the camera move was made on both of the objects at the same time. That's putting the two elements together with a matched move, or motion control.
Unfortunately, not everyone was quite so certain that it would fly. Apogee Head of Research and Development, John Ehrlich.
There were lots of clashes. Equipment was being built that hadn't existed before, and the people on the producer's side were understandably quite anxious, since nobody was able to say, this, we know this is going to work because it has worked. It was a case of take it on faith, it will work. But I have heard that amongst George's ideas for executing these effects were borrowing techniques from Bunraku puppet theater in Japan, in which you have a blacked out stage and animators basically dressed in black, carrying model spaceships on sticks and filming them that way live. That's a nice concept. Unfortunately, it really wasn't going to be sophisticated enough to produce the effects he wanted to see.
George was worried about seeing his dailies with a blue background and not knowing what the results would be in the final composite. Since we had never worked before and we were a bunch of sort of pirates, almost renegades, who didn't have much in the way of big screen credits, and I had to allay his fears in that way.
The blue screen system had fallen into disfavor because of the extraordinary skill it required to achieve a satisfactory result. Again, the versatile optical printer was at the heart of the procedure. Dykstra and Edlund decided to resurrect one of the obsolete film formats of the early 50s. By shooting the models with the larger negative VistaVision camera, they could minimize any grain buildup through the many compositing stages. Once the subject has been photographed against the blue screen, this optically neutral backing can be processed out, leaving the subject on a clear field, ready to be placed against a separately photographed environment. And when you print a blue screen shot onto black and white film, you end up with a set of protection mats, ready to preserve the area of the film in which the subject will ultimately appear. The classic Méliès black area trick continues to pop up in increasingly more sophisticated applications. But even the most impressive shots can stem from a combination of brilliant creativity and inevitable last-minute compromise.
The opening shot in Star Wars was done on a model that was about 40 inches long. We had concepts in mind of building a 50-foot long model for the thing, but by the time we got around to the shot, as you always are confronted with in movie making, the money was getting thin. And I said, let me try the shot, so I did. And I did a test. The test that had a little Rebel blockade runner that was about maybe an inch and a half long, stuck out in front on a wire just to see how it would look. And it looked fantastic, and after about 3 or 4 takes to finesse the thing and get it really perfect, that was the opening shot of the picture. That was one of the most important shots from a visual effects standpoint of the whole series, because if that shot didn't work, you didn't grab the audience on that shot, you may have lost them for the whole series, because first impressions are important.